You are listening to Three Kitchens Podcast, hosted by Aaron Walker and Heather Dyer.
We're home cooks sharing our adventures with you. Let's all get inspired, cook better, and just eat great food. Hello and welcome to Three Kitchens Podcast. We're your hosts, Heather and Aaron. And today we have a special guest. Her name is Julia Kraemer. She is from the Leftovers Foundation, a Canadian nonprofit with a vital mission to reduce food waste and enhance food access.
Yeah, so thank you so much for tuning in to this important discussion about food insecurity, food waste, and the environment. Enjoy. Welcome, Julia from Leftovers. We are really excited to have you here today on the podcast.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
We are really excited to learn more about this. Just before we pressed record here, we were talking that we've been interested in your business and what you're doing for almost half a year now. We ran into you at the Highfield Regenerative Farm Supalicious event. So can you tell us and our listeners what is Leftovers?
Yeah, so the Leftovers Foundation is a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to reduce food waste and increase food access. So we rescue surplus food that's no longer sellable, but still totally edible, and connect it to local nonprofits who are assisting folks experiencing food insecurity every day. We do this through a custom-made app. We run our rescue food program there, and that's our volunteer-facing technology where you'll sign up for a route that has your pickup point, which is a food donor, a drop-off point, which is the agency, all the details you need for both of those sites, so you know where to park, who to talk to, and then there's just a survey that volunteers fill out, including the weight of the donation and a little food safety observation checklist, and they've spent maybe less than an hour to help their community.
Wow, that is really cool.
For sure.
It's a pretty innovative solution to just like these two wildly complex problems, right? Food insecurity and climate change.
How did it start? How did this come about?
It really started quite simply. Our founder, Lourdes Juan, saw a local Calgary bakery, their end of day leftovers, around 200 pounds of bread, and that was destined for the trash. So our program was really born then and there. She, had a conversation with them, took those leftovers into her car, and delivered them to a local nonprofit. Since then, we've been putting systems into place to have volunteers pick up leftover, unsellable, but totally beautiful surplus food from local businesses that just goes straight to nonprofits, grassroots organizations, community fridges and pantries, so that people who need it have access to it.
That is really cool. It's so interesting how simple it seems just to take the leftovers and to put them into the hands of people who can use them, and that it just took that little connecting route to make that happen.
That's exactly the role that we serve, right? There's a gap between food that needs to be eaten today and folks who need to eat, right?
Yeah.
It's just about putting logistics in place,
Right.
creating a solution where there wasn't one before.
Yeah. What a fabulous idea.
So yeah, it's our city coordinator's job to get to know our service agencies, know our community partners really well, know what they need, what kind of capacity they can handle, what their client base is like, so that when we have these instances of surplus food, which, sometimes there's a system in place where they donate, on Monday every week or, a couple times a week. Other times it's like totally on demand, right? We've got this on demand function because food rescue really requires just-in-time logistics. So we can't do that work without really knowing our agencies and how they serve their people.
Right. And so how long have you been doing this? Or how long has Leftovers been doing this?
Yeah, okay, so Leftovers has been in Calgary for over 10 years, in different instantiations, but we are now in 8 regions. We're in Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Hinton, Airdrie, Lethbridge, Red Deer, and Selkirk.
Wow.
So we're spread across Alberta and Manitoba, hopes to expand, into more cities and municipalities as things kind of turn up. But we really aim to be localized, right? Really part of the community.
Do you have, either off the top of your head or in front of you, some stats? There are some very interesting stats on your website about the amount of food in a given year that's diverted to people who need it, the amount of people who are being helped, the amount that's saved from the landfills. I think people would
Yeah.
be interested to know some of that.
Since 2021, we have rescued over 1 million pounds annually. So it's a, yeah, yeah, it
Crazy.
is
Okay, wow.
astonishing.
Yeah.
You can't see my face, but I am like, what?
Yeah. And this is, keep in mind, all through volunteer effort, right? Like we've got a really small staff team, but we like to say the real work, the actual moving of food, is happening because community members are getting involved and kind of taking on this labor. So it's a really kind of magical thing that happens. All this coordination really is a community focused solution. So yeah, 1 million pounds across our regions. We've got warehouse spaces in Winnipeg and Calgary. So we're able to do some more large scale things. Like we moved over 100,000 pounds of potatoes through a Winnipeg warehouse last year. Potatoes alone was over 100,000 pounds.
Do those come from like a farm?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All
We're
right.
so lucky in Canada. We've got
Nice.
so many amazing agricultural producers who are so undervalued as a profession. In 2023, we provided over 950,000 meals, kind of that's an equivalent from the weight rescued. 304 service agencies served across our 8 regions, 269 different food donors. We had 374 active volunteers last year. Yeah, so it really is a community-based solution.
Very cool.
I've noticed there have been apps that have popped up, and I see them now, like when I go to different businesses where you can purchase their food that is on the way out the door. So
Yep.
the Too Good To Go app, I noticed, is now at the Tim Hortons near
Yep.
us. Does that take away from your donations from these businesses? Or like, I just kind of wonder if you're noticing it.
It's a great question. So the first thing I'd love to say is that technology is such an amazing part of the solution, and we need multiple solutions because the problem is that large.
Right.
We need to attack it from all levels. Nobody gets into the food business to not sell their product, right? Businesses exist, serve a purpose, of course, to the consumer, but also to make a buck. So we never want to discourage people from, doing what it is that they were meant to do. But in the cases of these kind of larger corporations who have the ability to donate, it's a wonderful thing you can do for your community. But in the same breath, having that discounted food, it has the potential to be donated, if not sold. It also becomes accessible to folks who maybe didn't have access to it.
Okay. Yeah.
At regular price. So that also is a benefit to those things. But there's lots of solutions to these issues. We think about our local businesses the most. Those are kind of the ones who have the most buy-in because they see the full impact of their supply chains. And, that's another thing that we talk about is food waste isn't just the actual food, right? There's packaging and processors and somebody who grew it and somebody who picked it and somebody who transported it. So food rescue really is about keeping all of those resources, the people resources, the natural resources, the water, the gas, the fuel, the time, keeping all of that valued, because when it goes to the landfill, all of those things go to waste.
Right. And I would think that the person who maybe takes advantage of the program that Erin's talking about, where you can buy a discounted bag of groceries or whatever, that's a person who then maybe is not accessing services from some of the organizations that you're delivering food to, which, then frees up maybe a spot for someone else who really can't afford to buy the discount. And anyway, I see what you mean about how it's all interconnected and
it all kind of works together.
And there are varying levels of food insecurity, right? Like not everybody is experiencing the most dire level. Sometimes it's just about the choice between buying enough food or buying the more nutritious food and being able to, buy a new winter coat or whatever it is.
Yeah, you've got sort of two big things: preventing this food waste and the environmental impact of that, as well as food insecurity. So, since we're just kind of naturally going into this food insecurity talk, can you define for us like what is food insecurity and sort of
Yeah.
how prevalent it is in our communities?
I would love to. So I think food insecurity is best represented when we know what food security is. So the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization has a definition for us. Food security is the condition in which all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to meet their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life.
Okay.
There's also a premise called the 5 A's of food security. So availability is sufficient food for all people at all times. Accessibility is physical and economic access to food for all at all times. Adequacy, access to food that's nutritious and safe and produced in environmentally sustainable ways. Acceptability, which is access to culturally acceptable food, food that's produced and obtained in ways that don't compromise your dignity or self-respect. And then finally, agency is the policies and process that kind of like enable the achievement of food security. So that's like empowerment by external forces like government. So when we know what food security is, we can say once we don't have any of those factors, we're experiencing a level of food insecurity, right? If your dignity is not centered, that's an aspect of food security that you don't have. There's some more research that I would love to point to. Nearly 9 million people across the 10 provinces are experiencing food insecurity.
That's terrible.
Yeah, there isn't enough good data that kind of captures the territories, but we know that northern and remote communities are facing just like astronomical prices for just the most basic food needs like milk and vegetables, all the transportation barriers. It's also really important to note that food insecurity doesn't discriminate. There are people from all demographics that are experiencing it, but rates of food insecurity is highest among Black and Indigenous populations. Food insecurity has really deep roots in colonization, and in, the systemic racism that's like written into the bones of our nation's systems. It's also not just people who are precariously housed. It's also people with jobs, families in 2-parent households. And the inflation that we experienced this last year and kind of post-pandemic really has impacted all of us, especially those who are already struggling to make ends meet. It's a growing issue to see the research year over year. It's quite astounding how it's increased.
Right.
Yeah, those are some big numbers.
Those are overwhelmingly intense numbers to listen to,
especially in a country like ours, right? We have enough food. Food insecurity is not about food. A third of what's wasted in Canada could feed everyone experiencing hunger. A third.
What?
Yeah, it's not about
insane.
food. It's about income and access, right? Income inequality is one of the greatest causes of food insecurity. We just don't all have equal access.
Yeah, and for any of our listeners who are outside of Canada, thank you for listening. Canada's population is like, when we say 1 million people, some parts of the world that might not sound like a lot of people actually, but in Canada it really is.
I think we have the same population almost as California. Is that number still right?
Something like that. That's why we're like, what? I mean, I think anyone can agree that 1 million people is a lot of people, but across a country as big as Canada that may sound small, it's not. So that's very interesting.
I don't want to say enjoyed, but it really was enlightening to hear that food insecurity isn't about the food. That's a big point that maybe it's hard to realize, right? Like that's something that isn't instantly evident talking about this, right?
Many of our major cities have, they are low income neighborhoods and they're considered food deserts, right? Access to a grocery store, access to produce, specifically, healthy options, right? With not just convenience stores or fast food chains in our major cities. And
Hmm.
that's a major issue. So that's a big part of what Leftovers is able to do is we take food from these neighborhoods with abundant choice and bring them to the service centers that are serving these neighborhoods that people just don't have physical access to be able to acquire food, let alone income.
Crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what to say. I'm just like,
It's truly wild.
that's so crazy.
I think many of us automatically think of like a food bank.
Mm-hmm.
That's something very familiar to most people, that a food bank collects food and distributes it to those people who are able to get there and get it. Talking about accessibility and neighborhoods and things, that comes to mind to me, because if I were to go, I'd have to drive there, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not like down the street from my house. So what sorts of other organizations are distributing food to people that maybe some of us aren't aware of?
So we get as grassroots as we can, beginning with the folks who are organizing and walking on the street, meeting people, in our downtown centers, or, the unhoused population need to find solutions. So encampments, there are groups that kind of organize, make day-old bread into sandwiches and are able to, provide a meal to folks in that very, very basic way. Step up from there is drop-in shelters, places where people are finding a safe night's sleep. We move into things like daycares and schools, especially in these low-income neighborhoods, day programs, drop-in centers, family resource centers, mental health programs, group homes, sober living houses, bail programs. Yeah, like people are accessing resources beyond food, right? It's not just food that people need. If people are experiencing food insecurity, they might also not have proper identification or an address where their mail is able to be sent to, or a bank account, or, so they're accessing resources in addition to food. It's a lot of these places are providing wraparound services, or like clothing and laundry services. Another thing that we just like totally take for granted, being able to change into clean clothes.
That's great that they can combine these services and bring food to the folks who are accessing all kinds of help.
It makes so much sense to bring it to where they're already coming. Like Heather mentioned, like having to go somewhere else if you are a single income household, if you have any other obstacles in the way, it's not like you can make another stop on the way home to pick these up.
Totally.
Having to go out of your way to access these resources just further limits your ability to access these resources,
Totally.
right? So it makes a lot of sense.
You have to get on a bus with your kids because you don't have childcare to get to the grocery store. Like the layers. If somebody who's fleeing a domestic violence situation and they didn't take what they needed, someone who's a newcomer that doesn't speak the language. Like there are so many barriers to access, and it really comes down to meeting people where they are. And that's what the agencies that we support are doing. I think that's our most kind of impactful thing in community, is that we're helping to address some of the immediate needs. It's food that needs to be eaten today, brought to folks who need to eat today, who are already accessing services. We're supporting the local infrastructure that already exists with food banks and in the nonprofit network, as well as providing solution for local businesses. These groups that we're supporting already have limited budgets and limited staff time. So when food donations arrive for them free of charge by a volunteer, it helps them to be able to continue addressing those immediate needs of community, which often begin with a meal, right? Their food budget, it can be stretched so they can feed more people, or they can put that into harm reduction supplies, or buying laundry detergent, or, so many of the other things that they do, because the food is there. It just needs to get there.
Yeah, for sure. It's just amazing.
Hey listeners, we really hope that you're enjoying this interview with Julia Kraemer from the Leftovers Foundation. If you are local, check them out at rescuefood.ca. Find out how you can contribute to this fantastic organization. And if not, check out what kinds of programs are in your community. Every little bit goes a long way to helping reduce food waste and food insecurity. Now, let's get back to the episode.
So we talked briefly sort of about the environmental impact. What happens to food that is not immediately perishable? Because that's like the stuff that would go to the landfill and generate gases and like that. There's sort of those kinds of byproducts of waste. But what about food? Like, do you get donations of food that's maybe not like immediately needs to go, but they have a surplus of canned goods or I don't know.
Definitely.
Yeah.
One of the most interesting rescues we've done is we got 6 pallets, more than you could think to ever use in your lifetime, cranberry sauce. Post Thanksgiving, post Christmas, who is using cranberry sauce?
Right.
So we got 6 pallets of it because it was nearing its best before date or had reached its best before date. But best before date, it's not about safety. It's about manufacturer guarantee. So, about the texture or separation or whatever it is. Doesn't mean it's not safe, right? We think about what the survivalists do. They've got canned food. We know that it's not about safety. So we just had to get really creative. Like, how can you use this? Can you use it in baking? Can you use it in a smoothie? Can you use it in a glaze or a marinade? Made it available to our community partners. And that's one of the kind of magical things is that nobody ever needs to take, there's no mandate of like, you need to take X amount to participate in our programs. It really is based on the need. So for some agencies, they were like, nope, would never use that. Nobody wants it. And other times they were like, yes, we've got students who are incredibly creative. We're going to come up with some way to use this,
Right.
So where there's a will, there's a way. But yeah, non-perishables really are non-perishable for quite longer than we believe them to be. So that's actually one of the most desired donations.
I'm sure.
For our agencies is things that can sit on a shelf and wait for the person who needs it. But that's kind of the main need of food rescue is those things that are perishable, that need those kind of quick logistics, that need to get to where they need to be right away. Kind of back to the environmental piece about greenhouse gases. So when food sits in the landfill, it produces methane, which is a greenhouse gas, and it's 25 times as potent as CO2 at trapping heat in the environment or in the atmosphere. So it's a big contributor to global emissions. If global food waste, this always drives me crazy. If global food waste was a country, it would be the 3rd greatest emitter.
Wow.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I feel like I'm bracing myself now when you're like, oh, you're never going to believe this. I'm just like, oh no,
what's next?
What is it going to be?
And that's an incredibly daunting, task to think about global food waste. Not a single one of us has the ability to impact that. But when we put these solutions into community and make them sustainable, make it a system that continues to run, which is what we try to do, right? Put a system in place where every Monday you have your pickup, or 3 times a week somebody comes and picks it up. It's a system that just keeps going, and sustaining the system allows our agency partners a sense of predictability as to what's coming in. It makes it something that our food donors just don't have to think about. It's just part of their system. It's just such a no-brainer putting the two things together.
Yeah. And all these what seem like small, tiny steps in what you're doing it's clearly having a huge impact on both of these really important issues that we have to think about and create solutions to. And it's not the big solutions that solve these problems, it's all these little ways of doing it. So that's really, really important.
And the volunteers that drive it and make it happen, right?
Literally and figuratively.
Makes me want to join. I might just join up. Makes me want to go deliver some food out to my
Yeah.
community. Seriously.
You know,
Yeah.
it really is
Yeah.
so easy. It's as simple as downloading our app. You make a profile and we'll email you our volunteer manual. Give that a read. It's got all the instructions you need. If you still have questions, our team is amazing. Reach out to your local city coordinator. They'd be happy to answer anything. But there's also a YouTube video you can watch. And then once you've read that, you're ready to volunteer. All of the routes are posted for you. Like I said, all the details are there. Pick up, drop off instructions. Most of our routes take under an hour. You can sort through and see what's in your neighborhood, find the time and date that works best for you. And yeah, it takes less than an hour. You fill your car, you drop it off, fill out a survey, and that's it. You're done. Yeah, it's
Easy.
it's supposed to be simple, fun, and really easy.
I'm sold.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's I mean, with the amount of time we spend driving here and there with kids or family or what have you, why not add this to your route?
Totally. Yeah, a lot of our volunteers do it on their morning commute or on the way home from work. There are, you know, you
Yeah.
just got to find the right thing in your community that fits into your life.
That's amazing.
There is one more thing I want to chat about. We have a seasonal program called Home Harvest. So in
Oh.
addition to our rescue food program, Home Harvest is meant to target, instead of commercial food, it targets homegrown produce. So your
Nice.
cucumbers, zucchini, tomato plants, a lot of the time you'll produce more than you can use, freeze, preserve, and share with your neighbors.
Mhm.
Once your neighbors are sick of you, give us a call. Just like our rescue food program, we'll come pick up your excess homegrown produce and relocate that to our service agencies.
Oh, that's
Perfect.
awesome. Do you do
Yeah,
so if I get like all my apples picked off my trees?
we will even send volunteers to come harvest your tree.
Wow.
If you have the
Okay.
ability to pick them, do it. We'll come
Yeah.
pick those up for sure. But yeah, Home Harvest actually is empowering folks to come and do the harvesting. You know, there's lots of seniors
Yeah.
with property. You know, a family can typically use about a third. I'm sure you know, about a third of what an apple tree produces.
Mhm.
So instead of all that fruit falling to the ground and attracting the wasps, somebody can
Yep.
come and pick it, and volunteers actually get to keep a portion, and then, you know,
Nice.
to thank them for their labor, and the rest is taken to service agencies.
That's fantastic because there are a
Mhm.
lot of fruit trees that I do see that just don't get the love and care that they need, and then the
Totally.
fruit goes by the way. Huh.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love that.
Crab apples too is a big issue is crab apples.
Mhm.
And we're partnered with a couple local cideries as well to upcycle those into product.
Nice.
Brilliant.
Wow.
Stay
That's
tuned for
amazing.
that.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
now that we're all excited and planting our gardens, like plant as much as you can,
Yeah,
harvest
experiment.
as much as you can, and then
Totally.
when you've got your fill of beets or whatever's gone wild in your garden,
Yeah,
you know it can go
totally.
somewhere and be
You
saved
know
and
who to call.
used.
And if you've signed up to volunteer to deliver, you can just deliver your own produce.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. Add it on. Talk to your city coordinator. We've got solutions, and we have, you know, we're connected to hundreds of service
Mhm.
agencies across our regions. So we know somebody who needs and wants it.
But I was just thinking, if anyone is concerned about, what happens to produce that's maybe just past its prime and it's not really the kind of thing they'd want to donate to people. We learned not too long ago from a guest, Whispering
Yeah,
Cedars Ranch, that there's a program, they go and collect from
with
like
Loop.
grocery stores. They
Yes.
collect the produce that's kind of not so great,
Yeah. Mhm.
that you'd pass over when you're at the store and you're like, oh, that
Totally.
doesn't look so good. And they take it and they feed it to livestock.
The hierarchy of food needs is people, animals, compost.
Yes, yeah.
Ah, that is a really good thing to think of.
Yes, no, totally. If it can't feed people,
Yeah.
it should feed animals for sure.
And they
Um,
love it.
yes, it's so
Yeah.
cute.
Yeah.
It's so cute.
If you buy direct from the farmer, you're then completing that cycle. So it's kind of cool. It's very cool.
Totally. That's amazing. We need more localized food economies and more circular food economies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And doing all these things
Amazing.
that connect together to work and
Yeah.
reduce these wastes is just fantastic.
And gets community involved too, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
Feels good.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's the best.
This is so cool. Like I knew we were excited
Yeah.
to talk to you and learn more about this. And I'm like, I'm just blown
You
away.
love it even more now. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, some other ways people can support us. Follow us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram and X. Tell your friends or your favorite food business about us. Download and
Hmm.
register the app to volunteer. You can donate funds or become a monthly donor, which of course we're funded by grant funding and private donations. And then visit our website, rescuefood.ca. Everything you need to know about volunteering, donating food, signing up as a service agency, all that information's free there.
And we will put all the links to all those things into the show notes. So if you're listening, you can just scroll on down and there they'll be.
Yeah.
This has just been enlightening and interesting and fun, dare I say?
Yay.
Fun conversation.
It feels like something that you can actually do because these are two big problems that just feel overwhelming all the time to think about when you're confronted with them. It's like, what can I do to help? And what an easy way to put a bit of your time in and make that impact on these things. So cool.
Love it. Thank you so much for joining us, Julia. This has been wonderful.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for having us.
And now for the fine print. For links to recipes and many other random things we talked about in this episode, check out the show notes or our website, www.threekitchenspodcast.com. Join us on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, YouTube, and TikTok to see what we're cooking up next. And if you love the show, tell a friend. Word of mouth is the #1 way people learn about new podcasts. Thanks for listening. Take over the world and solve the problems.
One community at a time.
That's right.
One car ride at a time.
That's how it works.